Now, two pigeons and Coach Prime bemoaning the fact you can stream DirecTV satellite-free.
These humans get the biggest college football games on DirecTV,
and we don't even get a satellite dish.
Enough squawking.
It's Coach Prime.
Bring it in. Sure, they could get all that college football without a dish, but you still got your passion, your drive, your resolve, your...
incredible career as a football icon?
No, that's me.
Stream the biggest college football games. No satellite dish. Visit DirecTV.com.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
No sweat or slow it down Thursdays and the fast Fridays have become, I think, a normal part of people who are part of that Chip Kelly tree or admire it.
On today's episode, we're joined by Mike Willis, who is now the head coach at Marist. The last time he talked to us, he was the offensive coordinator at Princeton University. Today, we're going to get into some of the different topics as they affect us in the late season. We'll talk about game day preparations, feedback loops, a weekly practice structure, and how coach thinks about adjusting it later in the season, and Fast Fridays explained as they do it at Marist. Stay tuned for Winning Edge Takeaway following the episode.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Reporting live from under my blanket, I'm Susan Curtis with Dunkin' at Home. Breaking news, pumpkin spice iced and hot coffees are back. I'll pass it to Mr. Curtis with his blanket for the full story.
That is so right, Susan. You know, it's never too early to get in a spicy mood. I'm talking cinnamony goodness that's so tasty, people don't want to leave their blankets either. Back to you.
No, back to you.
All you.
The home with Dunkin' Pumpkin Spice is where you want to be.
As we head into the later part of the season, we certainly want to consider what we need to do with our players to make sure that by the time it's game day, they're physically ready to go and also mentally prepared. And there's a lot of different ways that's been handled here, especially over the last 5 years or so. And that's what we're going to talk about today with Mike Willis, who's now the head coach at Marist. Mike, it's great to have you back here on the podcast.
Thanks so much for making time for me, and I appreciate all you do for the game of football.
Thank you. And we had Mike on before. He was talking to us when he was the offensive coordinator at Princeton. I'll link that one in the description. Be sure you check that one out. It's just an outstanding conversation on offense. But today we're going to talk about really, I think, something everybody has become familiar with, wherever it might have originated. I know certainly Chip Kelly was at the forefront of this and certainly made it popular. But the idea of the no sweat Thursdays, the fast Fridays that adjust at the high school level to different days, obviously, but doing it the right way. I know that a lot of people are trying this. I see that we kind of, as coaches, go back to our, I guess, comfort zone. Maybe some of it is a little paranoia of we just got to do more. We got to keep doing more in order to get better. But what you found, Mike, is that pulling back and looking at things in a different way, especially as you're hitting the later part of the season, is really smart.
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction, Keith. I don't think we have been reinventing the wheel at my previous stop at Princeton and what we'll be doing at Marist with the thoughts you just presented, the no sweat or slow it down Thursdays and the fast Fridays have become, I think, a normal part of people who are part of that Chip Kelly tree or admire it. Princeton, Eddie Morrissey, who's now the offensive line coach at Brown, who was my O-line coach in college at Princeton, I think, and GA'd for Chip at Oregon, deserves some credit in helping bring Princeton and our strength and conditioning staff and our head coach, Bob Strace, deserves a lot of credit as well at Princeton for moving this plan forward. We've grown and tweaked it over the years in a variety of different ways, some of which I think I can be really helpful. If you don't mind, I'll just jump into a few of them that I think are really helpful.
Yeah, that's great.
One of the first ways that we changed it, the rhythm of it a little bit at Princeton, is everyone has their scheduling constraints when they set practice, good, bad, and different. And at Princeton, our only opportunities to practice are super early in the morning, like 6 a.m. or so, or in our 4:45 p.m. block. And for many, many years, we practiced at 4:45 p.m. throughout the week because that's when no one has any class. The school does an awesome job of accommodating it. Many years ago, or I guess it would be probably about 3 years ago, we had a Thursday practice, which was already a no sweat Thursday, that got moved to the early morning by weather. So we had to go in the morning, and we were only, if our Tuesday and Wednesday is about 2 hours, our Thursday practice is usually no more than 90 minutes and sometimes less, about 80 plays, all at a pretty much walk-through tempo. And it got moved to the morning, which does put your staff under a lot of stress. The assistant coaches have to work really hard to turn around a Wednesday 4:45 p.m. practice and your final thoughts into a Thursday morning practice. But the payoff for the kids is actually pretty significant because they're not going to break a huge sweat. They don't have to be terribly warm. And our captains came to our head coach and suggested that they would actually prefer to go in the morning. The other shift that whether you're automatically a morning team or like me, had only been an afternoon coach for your whole career, that you get with your families as the season goes on, is if you flip that paradigm and then go through whatever else you have to handle during your day, whether you're a high school coach in a different role in the school or you're a assistant coach or head coach in college who has to handle their recruiting responsibilities or polishing things up for Saturday, you can get out of the office much earlier on Thursday and make sure that you're balancing the scales, spending time with your family. And I used to think of, in the Ivy League, you don't have a bye week, but I used to think of Thursday each week, particularly if it was a home Thursday, as essentially my bye week. Even in our most heavy, intensive, grinderish weeks of the season, I would be home by 4:30, get to pick my son up and spend time with him. And it was really awesome. The other thing we were really critical about on Thursdays is the way we set up our Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Some might disagree, and it's a topic of debate that we're working through on the Marist staff right now. But at Princeton, we worked to get our entire game plan in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays so that on Thursday, it was entirely reviewed. So my argument would be that no sweat Thursday best correlates with building a game plan schedule, especially as the year goes on and you have a lot of scheme that you're already comfortable in, you've practiced in, that is entirely reviewed. Save maybe a wrinkle, a tweak, a shift, a motion, a slightly changed route depth in a game plan call on Thursday. I think that's really, really, really relevant. And then on Fast Fridays, our version of Fast Friday was an 80-minute practice, most of which has no running at all, but about 25 minutes of which the offense and defense have the freedom as they steer it and as the head coach steers it to crank up the speed. And at Princeton, we would try to run a lot of plays on air in blocks of 4, simulating drives or simulating working through different segments of the field, the high red zone, the low red zone, a goal line series, whatever it might be. And the way we organized those clips was really, really, really thoughtful. We polled the staff and the head coach all the way on down for their favorite calls and used those to inform what would likely become our openers throughout the game, our favorite calls both in the open field and in each situation. And we would practice them with the kids so that they were understanding the 40 or so plays they were most likely to run to, open a game, the first, second, and even sometimes third quarter in these various segments. We also, to your point, Keith, about trying not to do too much, but doing it effectively, we would open each clip of 4 plays with a shot, and then the amount of running baked into the play, other than running to the ball and getting set on offense, would go down dramatically. So you'd start the drive with a long throw, build some confidence. The kids get excited. They learn to expect it. You can manage your receiver rotations off the fact that everyone will run really far on the first play, and so maybe you want to spin subs on the second play or whatever it might be, and then decrease the running as it goes on so that this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but a typical flow might be a long throw, a run, an intermediate throw or screen, and an RPO as you get closer to the 10-yard line, and then finishing the drive and breaking it down. Those 2 tweaks to a tried and true formula helped us prepare. They also give you the flexibility, especially when you're talking about Friday, to lean on your play callers on both sides of the ball, and then especially on offense, your quarterback and your receivers to figure out what they feel like they need more work at so that they can get a full speed rep at a play. For us, shot plays at Princeton were very important. They deeply correlated with victory, and we were really committed to them. And we wanted to make sure that if we were going to run the game, the kids were comfortable with it. They had the reps they needed throughout the week. And then the rest of the Friday could be taken to a pace where you weren't going so fast that you were taking their legs back from them.
Yeah, a ton I want to dig into there. And I'll just start with one that you mentioned about doing this on a Thursday morning. As I listened to you talk about that, I think it's really smart when we think about, well, wow, that's a quick turnaround, but you got to remember everything is a walkthrough on that Thursday morning. I think the other thing I liked about that is when that day is over, school day is over for guys, I mean, they rest, right? You now have them off of their feet for really over 24 hours now, where they get to recover a little bit. I was wondering if you had come across any of the sports science on that, in doing it like that in that format where there's a longer period of rest between that walkthrough and the next time that they're up on their feet again.
So the true sports science, the nitty gritty, the paper, the PhD, the papers and stuff, that I can't cite. What I can tell you is, we did a good job. And again, this is another thing that Bob Strace at Princeton deserves credit for. We did a really good job of polling our players formally each day through a daily questionnaire. There are apps that can do it. You can build a Google form. There are many uncomplicated ways to do it. And their reported levels of soreness during the week went down when you gave them that 36-hour gap, basically, between practices. And whether that's psychosomatic and in their own head, or whether it's based in science, I can't totally tell you, but I can tell you that some of our toughest players, we coached some great receivers, Andre Yosivas, playing in the NFL at 5 touchdowns as a rookie with the Bengals. Dylan Classy, was a tremendous college player, captain, and top 5 in many categories at Princeton. Those guys could run for days and would never complain, but they really enjoyed that schedule. And they were in many cases, our best players on offense and our highest use athletes. They ran the most during the week.
Yeah, I think that's the most relevant information, regardless of what the papers might say, is that feedback from your players. So I think that's a great way to do it. And I agree. It's great to be able to afford all the wearables and get all that data, but just asking your players, getting them to give the feedback on it, I think that's tremendously important and obviously inexpensive too. Looking at the setup of this, I think the important thing that you mentioned was our game plan is in after our 2 heavy days on Tuesday and Wednesday. And when I look back at how we would do things, there would be things that on Thursday, while we would usually go in shells and it wasn't necessarily a heavier practice, we weren't a walkthrough, but we would still need to get some work done on the game plan then. So we'd love to hear about just what that looks like on those other days to make sure that you're covering everything so that the end of the week can work like this for you.
Yeah, so I've done some research this year, and my opinions on it are still growing and evolving. I think people grow every year, but I can tell you what we did at Princeton, which was that Sunday, the players came in and lifted weights, digested film. Monday, that was the players' day off, and that was our time to get the game plan ready so that we could send them materials on Monday and then present it to them again Tuesday morning at a Tuesday morning meeting where we get the whole group together. And we would do normal downs and third down on Tuesdays. Those were the emphasis. And then Wednesday was cleanup of normal downs and the red zone, goal line, high red, short, low red, and then some of the auxiliary situations that come up 0 to 4 times a game. Short yardage, backed up, or your plan might be fairly similar week to week. The only situation we would touch later in the week is we actually would do 2-minute on Friday as a either walkthrough or plays on air segment, depending on the season. But by doing that, we were able to feel it's stressful as a coach, as an installer and a teacher, but the payout is that you have a very good sense by only halfway through the week what's working and isn't working. And you have these Thursday and Friday practices to modify and coach techniques to help them gain more awareness. This system also, in my opinion, is easier if you card things, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. We did not card defenses at Princeton as an offense. So we used terminology and had our scout team coaches try to use our defense's terminology to get the kids to play and then coach a couple players' specific reactions. So that required some communicating on the front end so practice would go fast. Our defense at Princeton was Coach Steve Herbert, the defensive coordinators, had been playing at a top 10 level multiple years in a row now. Card it, like many staffs do in the country. And their prep for Thursday was a lot easier because they would just basically recycle the cards. They would change their calls to the 150 cards they'd built in the first 2 days. And that way, practice was really straightforward for them. They were covering plays and looks that they had already gone through with their players and changing the call or changing the leverage or adding emotion or whatever so that they had to communicate a little bit more and go. And we would try to recycle but modify as many verbal cards as possible on offense to make sure we were varying the different looks that our core plays could get, changing the front to inside zone, changing the coverage shelf or the leverage on the outside receivers on our four verticals play, and doing this and emphasizing not new material, but making sure we had received all the different looks and then we're working the techniques as relevant.
Oh, such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com's primetime kickoff event. Save up to 50% off select styles, plus doorbusters. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So looking at it from the coach's perspective, the turnaround from Wednesday night practice to get ready for the morning, how are you guys handling that in an efficient way? You said it could be stressful for the coaches because of the quick turnaround, but what have you found to be most effective in, okay, here's what we're going to do to make sure we have a great practice Thursday morning?
As the OC, I asked everyone throughout the week to keep a Word document, iPhone note, whatever worked for them, of the plays that as we were going, they would like repeated and for what reason. And this is different people have different reasons for what they want to do. Your receivers coach might want to run a play again simply because he wants the receiver to get more work at a particular double move. He might not be as worried about the look. Your quarterback's coach might be really in tune with running that same play against a different coverage shell because he wants the quarterback to be forced to go through a different read. But what I found is if we had, instead of looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, it's 8 o'clock, I want to be out of here by 10 or 11, practice is digested and I've got to get practice ready and I've got to help our scout team coaches get cards. How can we possibly turn this around in the right amount of time? If I started by taking the document I had built of what I thought we needed more work at, and then filled in the suggestions of all of our assistant coaches against the particular looks, formations, whatever they wanted, the 75% of the practice was often scripted in the first 30 minutes I started. And then you tinker with the last 25% for the next 90 or so minutes. You go by periods so that your scout team coaches can be following you as you go along and working. They're not just waiting to say practice is done. And then hopefully you're both getting out of there at a semi-reasonable hour. I'm looking forward to this year being a Wednesday morning team and a Thursday morning team. We won't get the same incredible break each day, but I think as a staff, our rhythm will be a little bit better and we'll be home at a more reasonable hour. But that's because Marist College's structure is that of a morning practice game.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Now, a couple things on that Thursday practice when we're slowing it down. First of all, the working that, are you carting it up with the scout team? What are the things you found best, again, for that to be, while you're not physically demanding a lot, but that they're mentally engaged?
We have to make sure that what we are emphasizing there is the elimination of all lazy mistakes. So like learning mistakes to me, Keith, and how we categorize them are mistakes that are the result of growth. Trying to improve at a particular technique, just missing on a particular depth or whatever it might be. There's urgency to get those ready in the game on Saturday, but some of those things are just a natural part of growing as an athlete, technically. Lazy mistakes are the mistakes that come from lack of preparation and lack of study. So we want to eliminate mispicking signals, misaligning in formations, improper motions, cadence issues, and really hold the guys to account and make clear that that's very, very, very important to us in the way that Thursday practice is being moved along. As it relates to carding, we did it the same way we did in any other day. The thing you have to be really careful of is in the back end, speaking as an offensive coach, you really want to make sure that on the back end, your scout team defensive backs, especially your safeties and your nickel overhang, are still rotating enough post snap. They might have to play a little bit more at full speed, that your quarterback is processing correctly. To close the middle of the field on cover 3 might not help your quarterback process what he should do against cover 3 as well. So that's another tweak, is your scout team might have to play a little bit harder than your guys who are going to go in the game.
Looking then at the fast practice for you on Fridays, I think really smart things you mentioned on starting it with a shot and then taking the running out of it a little bit. I think you said with that too, that really comes from a collaboration of the staff of what you're going to run on that day, best plays, openers. So I would love to just get a little bit more detail on how that's going to come together into the way you organize the practice.
Sure. So after Thursday practice, we digest the practice, and then we had a Google document where our staff was asked to label their 5 favorite runs, 5 favorite passes in the game plan, their top 2 situational calls and all the different segments we have, third and short, third and medium, high red zone, low red zone. I could go on and on about those. I would then take our first draft call sheet for Saturday, and I would mark up that call sheet in my own kind of informal scoring system to see how popular certain plays were. And then I would also call the staff again about anything they thought we needed more work at, and balancing those 2 interests to make sure that we're going to cut bait. If a play still needs a ton of work on Friday, maybe it just shouldn't be in that week. Maybe it's a play we can carry as an emergency and then hope to use later in the season against a similar opponent if it's not a true designer. And then taking inventory of who's going to be in as well. Like we would rotate 1s, 2s in these series like many people do, but who went in each group can change. So if there's something your backup quarterback who you might expect to play a little in the game or not really needs work yet, give him that opportunity. Usually by varying the personnel groups, I could make sure that each drive had a featured player in it who was getting to do the things that they would get to do in the game, whether that's your 2-back package or your 12 personnel package or whatever it might be. And then just also it helps you get a feel, depending on how you choose to call the game. We didn't script our openers, but we did have a great idea of what we wanted to call. It does help your game feel, what you're going to do, how you're going to spit it out. And we made sure not to predetermine the hash marks or anything like that, so that you had to, sometimes I would override, right? You're still in control of practice. Hey, move this to the left hash so this kid gets to work. But it forces you, depending on your verbiage and what you use, to just get used to calling the game and running subs. And it's, other than that, there's no defense. It's a great game day-like experience for your players and staff.
Yeah, that was the next part I was going to ask you about, working on air, because that seems pretty simple. But I do believe if you're going to do it right, there's definitely a mental and a physical focus that needs to be emphasized, that needs to be taught to your players on this is how we're going to work on air. Would love to hear some of the keys to doing that successfully so that it's not just a cursory walkthrough and guys know they go in this general direction, whatever, but how are you getting the most out of that working on air?
Sure. So the first thing we do is we set parameters for them at the start of each mini drive. So we will tell them what type of coverage shell they're getting for the whole drive, and we won't vary it, so they understand that it's a 2-eye coverage shell with soft corners, and that's going to produce different reactions on different plays. And we'll also give the offensive line a front structure to operate in the drive. It's also important for your staff to understand who the key actors are on each play and how you can activate them. Plays on air are by far the most boring to your offensive line. So I think you have to make it vivid to them what is going on each play and present challenges to them. Your offensive line coach can say, hey, we're running inside zone and the -1 is out of the box. What does that mean? And communicate that vividly and loudly. -1's out of the box, and then see if your tackle says sip, 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 or whatever his call would be. And keeping them engaged and moving forward, I think, are really important. I think if you run an offense that involves any sort of digesting of front or coverage structure for your players, and you simply just roll the ball out there and say play, you're going to get receivers converting at the wrong time. You're going to get offensive linemen drifting all over the place, and you're going to get technique work that might not actually be good. I think that's really important, especially for your offensive line. Make sure you're finding ways to force them to communicate and challenge them, and whatever your procedures are between the snaps, make sure kids are great at that as well. Winning the game between the snaps, running to the football, depending on who picks signals, what's the procedure, and challenging them to communicate beautifully and to visualize the game.
Love the detail you shared on all this. The last thing I wanted to cover was the special teams and how this works into that Thursday and Friday. I imagine, again, Tuesday, Wednesday, everything's in as far as game plan. What does the structure look like for you guys Thursday and Friday?
Thursday, Friday, while there is technically a time cap, the special teams coordinator and head coach have carte blanche to cover everything they need to cover. So there are 4 10-minute special teams periods on Thursday, and there is a 25-minute special teams palooza to open the Friday practice. Then on Friday, we also do a mock game. So moving the ball over the field, head coach announcing different situations. The kickoff got returned for a touchdown, field goal block is up, all these different things. And we use that to cover some of the really niche end of game or unique special team situations that can come up, like a punt where you want to take a safety. That's something that we practice almost every Friday at Princeton.
Coach, really appreciate everything you're sharing here. Best of luck to you guys the rest of the way, and look forward to talking to you more in the future.
Thanks, Keith. I really appreciate it, man. And again, thanks for everything you do, and thanks for having me on.
Here is our winning edge takeaway from this episode. I think one thing to really look at here as you get later into the season is this concept of fast Fridays. And for a high school team, that would be on Thursdays. And the whole idea is that you're going to shift your walkthrough and make it a true walkthrough. At the high school level, be Wednesday. At the college level, be Thursday. And then on Friday, you're going to get that out there and you're going to move fast. Really going to go through things at a high speed, regular game speed pace, not contact, but moving through things. And it has to be limited. You can't go and be out there for an hour. You want to make it short and crisp. And I think this is a great way to refresh those legs, to keep your players mentally fresh. If you haven't done this yet, I would do a little bit of research. I don't think it's that difficult to implement. I think both your players and your coaches would enjoy something like this. And again, I think it'll refresh you mentally and physically. I'll put some links to some things we put together in the show notes. Be sure to check out our partners, Vertical Raise, for your fundraising needs, Modern Football Technology for analytics and in-game decision-making, and Signature Championship rings when you win the championship this year. Links and information to all of our partners can be found in the description and on coachandcoordinator.com in our 10% toolkit. Follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.